Howdy, I'm Jace and I'm a sex addict. This is Sex Life, where we talk about sex and we talk about life. We do so openly, honestly, without any shame or any judgment. This week's question is a fun one and totally fair question, and I think a really good point. I answer questions usually come from people who are in distress or in a difficult situation. As anyone out there who is an addict of any kind, or loves an addict, or is close to an addict, or is going through any kind of adversity, it can get pretty heavy. And there's some really tough stuff that we have to deal with in those realms. And we talk a lot about that stuff that's stigmatized and isn't discussed regularly. And so I thought this was a really great question. And it asks if I have any positive experiences with sex and if I'd be willing to share about any of those. I think that's a great question. As a person in recovery for sex addiction, one of the main goals is to become sexually healthy. And in my own human recovery, one of my main goals is to become holistically healthy. And because I'm a human, I'm also a sexual being, and so sexual health plays into that, right? I definitely have had positive experiences with sex and during sex. And I've had those throughout my time, though a lot of my sexual interactions in the past were through acting out, and those weren't necessarily super healthy. There were some positive experiences to come out of that as well. And now that I'm in a loving relationship with a really cool partner, I've had way better sex than I have ever experienced in active addiction. So if we're being totally honest, there were times in the past, I'm thinking of one in particular, it's really stuck in my head. It was someone I did not know. It was more or less a stranger who I had met, and we'll call him Adam. And we had a super fun time talking. I was out with a friend, he was out with a friend, the four of us kind of hung out for the night, and he was really fun, definitely felt connected, and as so many things in the past resulted in for me, we ended up sleeping together. He was in town visiting, so he didn't live in the city where I lived. And I remember, okay, I'll be honest, I don't remember the sex specifically. And I might have been drunk, which was very common in the past. Sex and alcohol used to be very close friends in my addiction. But what I do remember is afterwards, I was getting up from bed to go to the restroom, and he grabbed me by the hand and pulled me back into bed and wrapped himself around me. And he's like, "No, I don't want you to go. I don't want you to get up. Like, I want to stay close with you," which was super weird. Intimacy and like sweetness is not totally my jam at the time, but it made me feel desirable. It made me feel cared about and special and connected, and that I was wanted somewhere, which wasn't really the case for most of my life. I didn't usually feel that way, and because I didn't feel that way about myself, I usually sought out people who didn't treat me that way either. Full disclosure, I was in a relationship with someone else at that time. So that was a really uncool, selfish thing to do. And it was kind of a deciding factor for me leaving that relationship, because this person that I had been dating for months never made me feel that way. I never felt desired or cared about really by that person. So that doesn't justify sleeping with Adam, the stranger who I never saw or heard from again. But that was a positive experience, and it was someone treating me really nice, and that has stuck with me for like 10 years, that experience. Some of my favorite stuff has been more recent, and for anyone who doesn't know, when I was first getting sober, I was celibate for over a year, so I didn't have any sexual intercourse or oral sex or anything like that for over a year. And so I started out my legit sobriety, because I was sober before that, but I relapsed a lot. So my legit sobriety, I started out with a period of celibacy, and that actually, if we're talking about positive sexual experiences, that was one of the most positively powerful and impactful times in my life. I learned so much about myself as a person and as a sexual person. I learned about my boundaries and what I like and what I don't like and what's okay and not okay, and it was really cool. I can talk about that in another video. But more recently, because I am showing up as my real self, and I actually know who my real self is, and I like my real self, and I've worked really hard to be my real self. Like, I'm not like accidentally me. I'm intentional about who I am. And so when I show up, I get to be me. And that's really fun. And I'm not trying to be anybody. I'm not trying to be like this woman from a pornography or, like, oh, anything goes, just please stay around. Foolishness, right? So I get to just be me. And that makes sex so much more fun. I can remember an instance not too long ago where I was with my partner and we just, I was smiling so big because this person is so wonderful and we have such a great connection and we have so much trust built between one another and respect and honesty and all this stuff that I used to think was lame, but it's actually really cool. I was smiling and I was smiling so big that it just turned into laughter. It was like I was overwhelmed with joy, that my smile just kind of exploded off of my face into laughter. And he started laughing and we were laughing together, not at each other. There was nothing funny going on. It was just like there was so much happiness inside of me that we were having sex and it was like in the middle of intercourse and we're just like locked eyes and we're smiling and we're laughing. And it was such a fun and silly and cool experience. And I get to have more things like that where I'm really there and my emotions are really coming out as well, which is really neat. And I'll share one more story if you want to stick around to hear it. Another kind of weird one, but one that I'll be honest with. I was in a relationship, a very serious relationship for a while, and the person that was in that relationship with me was also an addict and someone who was very unwell, and he treated me really, really badly. He was abusive and was so shaming when it came to sex. And I mean, he would look at me like I was trash. Just so degrading. And honestly, like in that relationship, my skin crawled. I felt so disgusted to be myself. If there was any music on the radio that had a sexual tone to it, I felt terrible. And I honestly wanted to sand all of my skin off so I could escape being who I was. I really hated myself. I hated my physical self. There were times throughout my addiction and the things that I was participating in, I would wish with all of my might that some horrific accident would happen to my genitals so that I wouldn't be able to continue this sexual behavior because I really didn't want to be doing it and I couldn't stop, and that sounds so cliche and generic, but I tried and it wasn't working for me until I got help. But I would just I didn't pray at the time, but wish and dream that some terrible accident would happen to my genitals so I would stop acting out. So I had all of that, right? And then I started a relationship. I mean, they're all relationships, but it was purely on the basis of a sexual transaction, not financial one, settle down. And this person who was not a significant other of mine, they were just a sexual partner that I had, was so patient with me. There would be times where he would just touch my shoulder and I would start sobbing unexplainably, right? He didn't know what was going on. It was all that shame and self-hatred and disgust that I had inside from this past partner. And also, I already thought those things about myself. So when this man confirmed them, it was really terrible for me. And so I had this other guy who we'll call John, And he was so patient, and we would move through sexual encounters really slowly. And I was able to talk with him, and he just showed up without any judgment for me. And I was able to rediscover myself as a sexual being who was damaged. And I really, really appreciate that from that person. I've no way to contact him, and that wouldn't be appropriate, but I do. I have a lot of gratitude for that guy. So there are a few. What I can say to wrap up is that I have had plenty of sex, a lifetime's worth of it, in lots of different ways, with men, with women, combined, all sorts of things. And sex now that I love and care about and respect myself, and I'm with someone that I know and trust, is so much better. It's a gazillion times better, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow. The healthier I get, the bigger everything in my life gets, and my sexual experiences keep getting deeper, keep getting more satisfying, and there's actual substance beneath them, which I think is really cool. So yes, I definitely have had positive experiences with sex. It can be a very beautiful thing, very enriching thing, and as we know, it can also be a very damaging thing. So not to be taken lightly, in my opinion. Super awesome question. Thank you so much for that. If you have a question, feel free to send it in to my website, jacedowney.com. And until I see y'all next time, stay curious.